How would you like to go through life making money, cha-ching, 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 without the drag of taxation? How much wealth could you create if you could cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching without the drag of taxation? And in addition to that, if you could supercharge it with leverage, only putting a small portion of your own money into deals and having the rest of the money come from OPM, other people's money. It's amazing how quickly people can compound and build wealth over 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years in real estate. How much wealth you can amass. It's amazing.
Welcome, everybody, to the Creative Cash Flow Show. I'm your host, Jesse Mills, where we bring you real estate secrets for achieving time and money freedom every week. And ladies and gentlemen, I am so pumped to have our expert on the show here today, Jeff Peterson with CPEC 1031 Exchange. And Jeff is one of the guys, you know, when you have someone in your network, you're like, who's a good person to talk to about X, right? Who's a good person to talk to about Y? And you have a couple people that refer their name. Well, Jeff's name has come up literally like a dozen times from every one of the agents I know, investors I know, people that don't know each other, but everybody says Jeff Peterson. And so Jeff, I'm like, how have you and I not connected yet? So I'm super happy to have you on the show and get to know you better and learn all about you and how you're helping people and why your name comes up like every freaking time. It's awesome. So welcome, man.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I am excited to be on this podcast. I'm excited to talk to you about what we do in helping people defer their taxes and to build their wealth over time without the drag of taxation. My background is that I'm a tax attorney. I've also taught tax at Mitchell Hamlin Law School as an adjunct tax professor. And our business has been headquartered in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We've been exclusively facilitating 1031 exchanges since 1998.
Wow.
And check us out on Google. We've got over like 85 five-star reviews on Google Reviews,
Awesome.
which I think is a great testament to the good work and hard work ethic that our group has to make sure that we're, helping people. That's really what this business is about, is helping people facilitate the mechanics of their exchanges.
Absolutely, man. Well, and I mean, number one, most people don't take the time to do reviews. And so, or they're negative, right? That's unfortunately a horrible thing with the society that we're in is they'll take a minute to do a bad review, but nobody wants to do the good ones. So that many good reviews is a huge testament to your business. As long as you've been doing it and the fact that you were teaching and at a prestigious school like that, wow, that's awesome. You clearly, know your stuff. And one thing, before I even knew that you were we were gonna meet here today, when your name kept popping up, I'm like, okay, I like something that this guy's doing, which is you took an area that's super broad and then you really niched it down and you're owning your niche, right? Your niche, whatever you want to say, however you prefer to say it, right? But you're owning it, right? And I spent 15 plus years in the mortgage business and, a decade or so in real estate and have been able to kind of carve out a little niche for myself in my business and do something that is very unique and really I want to just dial in on what I do and be amazing at it and not try to do all this other stuff, and it's taken me a number of years to figure out that that's probably the better way to do life. But it's a cool way, right? And so you've definitely done that. And again, when people just say your name, there's no better marketing and advertising than just word of mouth like that. So, wow. So you've been doing this a long time. One thing, Jeff, is I want to learn a little bit more about you and kind of what got you into this. Right. And we have, a variety of audience members. So we have some people who are brand new to real estate, right? They're listening to all the podcasts, they're watching all the YouTube shows. They're excited. They're learning, maybe haven't done anything yet. A lot of them know the lingo. And then we also have people who have, 100 plus units, 200 plus units, right? 10 million, 30 million under management. We have a nice variety. So I want to just get into what exactly is, at 1031, just some of the mechanics of work, so we don't have to make a class about it necessarily. And I want to really kind of pin down on some questions that kind of pertain to some of the creative stuff that is out there and that we're doing in our team towards the end, if that's okay.
Well, I was in law school at the University of Minnesota, and in my last semester of law school, my wife and I had our first child. And nothing makes you get mature and straighten up. You are now responsible for this child, and you got to provide. So came out of law school, and almost immediately after getting out of law school, stumbled into this 1031 niche, which was not very well known at the time. It was an obscure, seldom used provision in the late 1990s when I came out of school. The regs had only been issued in 1991. Mom and pop, random investors weren't really using it yet. And in the Midwest, I really went out and started doing presentations, teaching educational classes about how to use 1031, and tried to get as many people on the bandwagon as possible. Now, real estate-wise, things that have influenced me. There was a guy that was teaching classes on how to do real estate investing named Carlton Sheets. He was like one of the very first people selling these audio tapes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were
I remember Carlton.
They were the cassette audio tapes. So
Yeah.
he was a big influence on my life. Robert Kiyosaki, the whole thing, all of those books totally influenced me. And then Think and Grow Rich. That book, it's The Mind is the Maker. That whole almost like self-hypnosis thing where you want to hypnotize yourself to succeed, to see opportunities, because I think the mind truly is the maker. So those are my influences. I am an entrepreneur. I run my own business. And if I'm not providing good service, the economy is going to teach me a lesson. My competitors will teach me a lesson, right? So I need to be very sensitive to a lot of things. How pleased are my clients with my services? What is the Federal Reserve doing to interest rates? What are the general trends in our industry? And how do we staff appropriately to make sure we can handle the level of business that we have in facilitating exchanges? Those are a lot of things that you have to do all at the same time to run a successful business. And then you've got to worry about taxes and payroll and insurance and all of the standard, run-of-the-mill things that all business owners have to attend to. I've been very successful. And I will tell you, the multiplier in my life has been my wife, Marna. Marna Peterson is my wife of 30 plus years, but more importantly, she's been involved in our business since the Great Recession in 2008. And she is meticulous. She is orderly. She is organized. And she is, like I said, the multiplier in our business, because without her implementing her and refinements and improvements to our business, we wouldn't be able to give such great service to our clients. So I want to give a big shout out to Marta Peterson with CPEC. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So just that's my background. Why don't I let you ask some questions, and I'll try to be responsive to those now.
Well, I love that. I love that. And I'll tell you what, it's I think your wife and my wife must hang out because my wife has many of those same characteristics and traits. And it's funny, right? With the business owner, I mean, we're all over the place, and we have all these different ideas, and we're visionaries, and we're leaders, and we might have a dozen ideas, and certain things might be billion-dollar ideas, and do they pan out, and are we going for them? Somebody's got to keep an eye on the stuff that's humming and moving and taking care of people and systems and processes and organizations. So I love that. I think that's a great little reminder for folks out there that hey, if you're single and you're shopping for a partner, keep that in mind. But if you're actually looking for a business partner, you don't want someone who's just like you, right?
The most important financial decision that you'll probably ever make is, who do you marry? I believe that's true.
I wish I could pan my camera, but then it would really screw things up. So in my office, 3.5 4 feet away here, I've got a little sign on the wall that says 21 Suggestions for Success by H. Jackson Brown Jr. The first one says, marry the right person. This one decision will determine 90% of your happiness or misery. That's funny.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
that's number one on the 21.
Sounds like you and I stumbled onto good choices. So good for us. I'm happy.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure they're very patient with us too, right? The other thing I want to, hopefully,
Some days.
Some days, it depends. Well, one other thing too is, I'm sure anyone listening, right, to this has seen a theme that you mentioned some pretty profound folks, and you obviously do a lot of reading, and you're a reader, and you're a student of the game, and right, and I think that's so powerful. I'm obviously a reader, love to just absorb as much as I possibly can. So we have that in common, 100%. I love it.
You bet.
And up here, man, what comes in here is so crucial, right? That is the most important real estate you have, is between your ears and what you're letting in and what you're absorbing and who you're around. So it's always just great. Every single person that we have on the show seems to have a lot of those same traits who are successful. So it's cool to see it.
I will say I've also been blessed with a couple of good friends and mentors. There was a prolific real estate investor named Larry Hoffensperger in Minneapolis. He's now deceased, but Larry had bought a lot of real estate in long run. He had started out as a broker, then became an owner, and built a very big portfolio. He would buy the ugly duckling. He saw opportunities, and he bought a lot of stuff on Eat Street, Nicollet Avenue in South Minneapolis. He really could see opportunities where others could not, and he was not afraid to expound his belief. Larry did an interesting thing. He would write down 3 goals on a piece of paper, like 30 times each goal. I am rejoicing in a good real estate find. I am rejoicing in a happy marriage. I am rejoicing in a healthy, happy body. He would write these goals down because he believed biblically that it helped manifest his goal. And he would use the word I am rejoicing because he was supercharging his subconscious. His conscious brain was trying to tell his subconscious brain, this is the direction I want to go. I want to be, rejoicing in these things. Larry was a great mentor. And then another mentor that I had was a guy named Steve Leifschultz, who was a banker. I don't think he's still in the Twin Cities area. I think he's living in California. But, he had been to the top. It attained a certain degree of financial success. And once you've gotten to the top of the mountain, you've seen how easy it was to climb, you can get there again and again. And he was instrumental in sort of saying, hey, this is how you use leverage. This is how you use an appreciating asset like real estate. And so between those two mentors, I think I've been blessed to have some insights from other people's positive experiences and hard work. And it's been a motivating factor for me.
That is awesome. I love that. And yeah, the power of using the present tense, right? Or the future tense. I mean, well, yeah, I'm really present. It's like, I have it, even if you don't have it, right? I'm rejoicing over something I have as if, well, you don't have it yet. Yeah, but the more you tell your mind that, your mind thinks you do have it, right? And it's that kind of subconscious trick. Well, I want to
ask you something, Jesse. Your earliest memories that you can conjure up in your mind are probably memories that are tied to an emotional experience, either a good emotional experience or a bad, something bad that happened to you, scarred you deeply, or something good that impacted you, and you can recall it even now, 20, 30 years later. So by supercharging your goals, writing them down, you are helping yourself internalize that down into the subconscious. Truly believe that. So for your listeners that are into this, give it a try. Try it for 30 days and see if you make changes in your life.
Yeah, I love that, man. I love that. It's exactly. And then give it a test and, let's hear from you if you give it a go for 30 days, but you will notice a difference 100%. And clearly, if you keep seeing that pattern around other people you're working around, right, you got to be blessed to have a lot of very intelligent, successful people, which is super cool also about your business, right? So you get to learn from them, they get to learn from you. So I love it. I love it. Well, let's kind of dive into a little bit about, I want to really drop some gold today for our listeners on, if they don't know about a 1031 exchange, they've never done one, why they haven't done one, right? Maybe some ideas that they have are wrong, right? And you're working with some extremely wealthy, successful people who, have some of these big portfolios. And again, right, I know you also work with probably people just starting out, right? So you have the whole gamut in your clientele, but you see this whole kind of track record, which is cool. So for somebody, and again, we'll get into the weeds. I want to get in the weeds here towards the end of the show. Some real detailed stuff for people. So if you're like, I know all this, hang tight. We'll get deep. But for somebody who's not quite sure exactly what a 1031 is, how it works, what's your 90-second elevator pitch?
How would you like to go through life making money, cha-ching, 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 without the drag of taxation? How much wealth could you create if you could cha-ching, 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 without the drag of taxation? And in addition to that, if you could supercharge it with leverage, only putting a small portion of your own money into deals and having the rest of the money come from OPM, other people's money. It's amazing how quickly people can compound and build wealth over 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years in real estate. How much wealth you can amass. It's amazing. My greatest satisfaction is helping young investors that are just starting out, that have accumulated some hard-earned equity, and helping them grow that and build their empires. It's astonishing. And I kind of kick myself that I'm not doing it more in my own personal life. But, I also have a calling. I'm going to run this business, and it takes a lot of energy. But for all of us, we should keep an eye on having our side hustle real estate empires, building and growing on the side while we're doing our daily 9-to-5 jobs.
Hey guys, Jesse here. Just jumping in real quick to remind you, if you haven't gone to newyeargoalplanner.com yet and downloaded your perfect New Year worksheet, go take a minute right now and get it done. Guys, you're not going to hit your goals unless you have them written down specifically and looking at them every day. And on top of that, you have to know what your time is worth, because every single minute of time, if it's being wasted unproductively, is money out the window. And guys, I want you to focus hard on your goals. So go to newyeargoalplanner.com, download my free sheet. It's free, I'm not selling you anything. I just want to give you the tool that I'm using to hit my goals in 2023.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny because sometimes when you're in the business, right, it's almost like you're so ingrained in what you do that you're not necessarily doing more of what you are teaching and helping. And especially, boy, I'll tell you what, if you're a real estate agent out there listening to this, I know we have a lot of agents that listen to this, right? You're helping all these other people create wealth and a future retirement, right? And that passive income and that laptop lifestyle that I like to talk about all the time. But you got to be doing it for yourself, right? You got to be doing it for you as well. So, and time is on your side if you're young, but it is, a little tougher as we get older. But that's the thing, is what you do, Jeff, is you're providing a shortcut, really, right? You're providing this massive shortcut. And I think that is such a crazy tool and opportunity that you're providing to people that it's a gift. It really is. It's like, if you didn't know what you're doing, and let's say somebody didn't meet you 10 years ago and they did, and you take those two people side by side, and, of course they met you and used you and utilized you. And, because you got to put this into practice. It's amazing. So one of the big misconceptions, I think, is some people think with 1031s, you never pay taxes. Is that true or not true?
Well, in 1031, you're merely deferring the taxes, but you might be deferring them indefinitely and possibly perpetually. But in the tax code, there's two terms of art. There's the realization of gain. That's the cha-ching, you just made a profit, or wah, 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 you just lost some money. It was a bad trade.
Yeah.
But the other term of art, in addition to realization, is the recognition of gain. Recognition means that transaction is going to become taxable in the current year. And the beautiful thing about 1031 is the code section says you're not going to recognize that gain that you're realizing in the current year. You're not going to recognize it till some indefinite point in the future. Could be 30, 40 years before you sell that replacement property and trigger the realization and recognition of that gain. Or possibly you die owning the property, and knowing some other code sections in the Internal Revenue Code can help you strategize, because Section 1014 of the Internal Revenue Code says that when you, Jesse, inherit the farm from mom, you don't take it with mom's low basis. the basis of the farm is stepped up to the fair market value at the time of mom's death. So defer, 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 die. That is the mantra, right? Build this empire, never unnecessarily recognizing gains throughout your entire lifetime, deferring, exchanging, and so forth. And then when you die, you can pass this wealth, this property, to your heirs and let them get a stepped up basis. That is the play.
That's the play.
Where you don't, where really no taxes are ever paid. Now, accountants will say, yes, that's sort of true, but you're also deprived of the depreciation, because when you acquire the replacement property, you don't have a full basis on it. The basis of that property is reduced by your prior tax exchange. So you're not able to take advantage of as much depreciation because you don't have as much basis in the properties as you move forward. And that is true. But the way to fix that problem, practically speaking, is to always buy a more expensive replacement property, so you're always buying more basis. Well, you and I know we want to buy more property for another reason. Because when the tides of appreciation come in, we don't want to have just a little rowboat in the harbor. We want to have a mammoth, barge that's rising in value. So the more we can buy, the more we control, the more appreciation we can attain.
So I would imagine that in certain situations, maybe what you said would make sense when you really want that depreciation and it's kind of an individual situation, maybe. But more often than not, that still doesn't make sense, especially if you're stepping up and getting more expensive properties over and over and over. Am I catching that right?
I think most of our clients are going to lever up to the hilt. They want to get as much real estate as they can under their control. That gives them more basis for future depreciation deductions. And we want to get as much real estate under our management and control as possible so that we can have that go up in value. How does it go up in value? Well, partly it might be your own good efforts, your own stewardship of the property, being a strong manager, but also you have the effects of inflation. As the U.S. currency declines in value over time in comparison to hard assets, you build wealth in your real estate. And the United States government has mistakenly thought that they can print dollars without it adversely affecting the value of the currency. And now we're starting to feel that, and that's called inflation. So a lot of energy is being spent to try to tamp down inflation. But for real estate investors, inflation can actually be a positive thing because it increases the value of your property. And as long as you can continue to raise your rents and increase your revenues to keep up with inflation, you're going to be fine.
Well, and I think that's such a great reminder is, number one, the media, guys, if you haven't caught this by now in 2023, the media is skewed, right? And I usually say somebody owns every company, right? Every this, that, there's an agenda. But at the end of the day, the news is only affects certain people. And so, yeah, exactly. Right now, we are in such an amazing time where 80, 90, 95% of people are going, oh, woe is me. This is bad. What's going on? And there's a percentage of folks going, this is fantastic. Like, this is helpful, because it depends on what side of the fence you're on, right? And so keep that open mind and make sure, you're listening to all the different sources, because this actually can be helpful. And you said it perfectly, like why it is, right? With the devaluation of our currency and what's going on with the unlimited printing press. It's just insane. So, Jeff, what's a few different ideal or perfect times for somebody to speak with you? Like, they're thinking about selling something, they're thinking about buying something, and who are the people you're typically working with? I have a feeling I'll let you articulate, right? There's folks that just don't jive exactly with the way you do what you do, and there's ones that are a perfect fit, and they're kind of, I'll just call it stupid for not even talking to you for someone doing what you do.
Well, I'm going to answer that question by telling you when not to talk to me.
Even better. Perfect.
So recently, I've been getting a lot of phone calls from people that are saying, hey, I closed on my relinquished property a month ago, and I want to do a 1031 exchange. And I think, am I
Eh.
being punked? Am I being punked? I mean, is this like a joke? But it happens with so much regularity. So the first thing I want to say is you need to engage your qualified intermediary, our services, before the benefits and burdens of ownership shift to that buyer, which is typically before the closing happens. Because if you receive the cash proceeds from the relinquished property, either constructively or actually, then you've got a realization and a recognition of gain because you got the money in your hands. So when do you call me? Before the closing takes place. And ideally, a couple of weeks before the closing, because in order to have a smooth signing ceremony without disrupting the other folks involved in the transaction, it's best to get us involved early enough that we can interact with the title company or the law firm and the other people involved in drafting closing documents to make sure that things are done correctly and without drama, right? We don't want to ruffle feathers if we don't have to. So many people are getting a hold of me for a sort of introductory call as they're listing their properties for sale or signing a purchase agreement with a potential buyer. And usually we're dancing around each other a little bit until those initial inspection contingencies are waived by the buyer. But once we've got a buyer and the buyer is looking promising and going to go forward, then we really get involved. Things that I like to encourage people to do at that early stage when they're marketing their property for sale is to contemplate putting a very strong clause in their purchase and sale agreements with the buyers that says, seller is intending to do a 1031 exchange, and seller is going to elicit the cooperation of the buyer. There's not a lot of cooperation required of the other parties, but we do want to give them a required notice that pertains to the seller's exchange. And how do we prove that we gave them that requisite notice? We ask them to sign an acknowledgement. Yep, I got this piece of paper. That's all they're doing is acknowledging we gave them a written notice. But
Like
you would be surprised at how many people get exasperated and they don't want to cooperate because they feel like they don't know what a 1031 exchange is. They feel like they're being hoodwinked. So the best time to deal with this is in the purchase agreement, not at the closing table when people may be more edgy. And that edginess can be stirred up by a prima donna real estate agent that maybe doesn't know what they're doing also. So let's put it in the contract, shout it from the mountaintops that we're intending to do an exchange.
I love that. And I would be willing to guess that's a little secret, if you will, that you utilize that a lot of other folks might not even do and now realizes an intelligent little edge, right, to put in there. But that's awesome to have that.
I'm happy to provide people with sample language that they can use and or adapt as they see fit in their contracts as well. And I will mention to you that in order for the smoke and mirrors of an exchange to work, you technically need to assign your rights in that contract to the intermediary. Some of the realtor forms in the boilerplate prohibit assignments of the contract without the other party's written authorization or consent, especially in Florida. So putting that sample language into your contract can also set the stage for a smoother, less contentious closing. If other aspects of the deal are getting tense, you don't want to bring more problems to the table by having the other party have sway over your ability to smoothly do an exchange.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you want to do it at the very beginning when everyone's excited to make a deal come together and it's all amicable before things start to, shift and morph throughout the process, right?
Right.
Well, and you bring up a great point too that I like to point out is, I've got a couple of files as we speak I'm thinking of. People sometimes just don't understand the number of people involved in a real estate transaction. And when you don't do your part of getting a document over or getting your cash to close or doing what you say you're going to do, you're not just affecting one person, but it's literally 3, 4, 5, 6 people potentially and their teams and their time. And right. So it's a complicated process and it takes somebody with a lot of patience and experience like yourself to walk people through and really hold their hand and say, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. Right. Now you had just mentioned, and I like this because obviously we have listeners, all over the country, other parts of the world, which is fantastic. Right. So things are different everywhere. So, what states do you operate in, Jeff?
We are nationwide. We provide exchange
Beautiful.
services throughout the entire United States. And little known fact, you can do 1031 exchanges of foreign real estate, but you can only exchange foreign real estate for other foreign real estate. And though I'm not really looking to do foreign property exchanges, note, Jesse, that you are taxed as a U.S. taxpayer from all of your income from whatever source derived. Even if you're selling real estate in New Zealand, the United States government can tax you on those gains. So if you happen to own investment properties in New Zealand and you want to exchange it for other real property in Australia, I could help you facilitate that foreign property for foreign property exchange. We've done a few of those because of the cultural differences and generally an anti-American attitude that seems to exist outside of the U.S. It can be very trying to try to layer in a 1031 exchange on foreign real property. But just as a piece of trivia, we can do it outside of the U.S., but our focus is here in the United States and primarily in the Midwest and the Northeast and probably the whole Eastern Seaboard is kind of our backyard.
That's fantastic. That's awesome to know. Well, and you mentioned two of my favorite countries. I spent 6 months in New Zealand and Australia. So now you're making me want to go get some real estate there. I do have some international vacation rental destinations in the near future, but we'll start here. And go
Well, I
into
will
this.
tell you, I mentioned New Zealand for two reasons. There was an article that came out yesterday that New Zealand real estate transactions are at their lowest they've been in 10 years, perhaps because they're raising their interest rates, who knows. But we've also done a foreign property exchange in New Zealand, and the customs and practices and ways that they do transactions there are phenomenally different. Even though we come out of the same British common law sort of origin, they've evolved completely differently than we have in the United States. They don't even have an actual paper deed to convey the property. The attorney records in a electronic fashion the transfer.
Wow.
There's no signed deed, no instrument. It was astonishing to do that, to
That's
work
crazy.
with them.
My gosh. That's awesome. Yeah, there's so many differences, right? But that's just it. So even just state-wise, like you had mentioned Florida. So you need to know those differences in those state rules. So ladies and gentlemen, if you have a piece of real estate you're thinking about selling, or you're in the process of selling, you have not closed on yet, and ideally you're not closing on the next 48 hours, but I'm sure, Jeff can handle some Hail Marys like I do, but that's the time to start this process, right? And obviously there's a number of steps, and they're linked with timelines that have to be done in the right sequence. And we want to make sure that we're giving ourselves the amount of time to do that and making, smart choices, right? Can it get done rushed? Of course it can. But is it the most intelligent decisions? Probably not, right? So is there any time other than someone's already sold it, Jeff, right? If someone's already sold it, sorry, the game ended, the buzzer ended, it's too late, right? You cannot do a 1031. What other situations does it not make sense to do a 1031?
Well, if you don't have a gain, you don't need a 1031 exchange. Some people have recently inherited property, maybe from a deceased relative, and they assume, since they're getting all of this money, that they must have a tax problem. But because of the step up in basis, they may not have a tax problem. And, let's just talk about who do you surround yourself with to make the most informed decision. Having a good accountant or tax preparer on your team is important. Having a good real estate agent is important. A good lender, loan broker, maybe a good real estate attorney for both transactional but also property management issues. So you want to build your team and use your team to help you make the most informed decision for your specific situation. I would say that having a wicked qualified intermediary on your team can be very advantageous also when it comes time to making transitions. Most of our clients are trying to buy properties of at least equal or greater value, at least equal or greater equity, and to the extent that they have debt, mortgages on their old property, they want to offset that debt relief with new debt on the replacement property. Or they can also offset the debt relief by adding more cash in out of their own pocket. So just yesterday, I talked to somebody selling a property interest for $600,000 after paying off $450,000 of debt. They're going to have $150,000 of net proceeds. They're selling the property in Wisconsin. They're going to take that money down to Florida and buy a new piece of raw land for investment or business purposes. Again, that property in Florida has to be of equal or greater value, so they need to buy something for $600K. They need to put their $150,000 of radioactive cash proceeds and bury that cash in the new Florida land, and then they need to make up the difference. Now, most of our clients use new mortgages to offset the debt relief.
Okay.
But in this case, the client is flush.
So
they
don't
have a
need
lot
to.
of liquidity. So they're going to pay cash for that Florida land. And because it's raw land that they're buying and it doesn't generate cash flow, it's actually just easier for them to pay cash because it's hard to get a loan on a piece of property that doesn't generate income. So they're paying cash. That is the goal. Go up or equal in value, go up or equal in equity, and offset your debt relief. Those are the bullet points, the general rules of thumb that most people need to be cognizant of if they want to fully defer all of their gains.
Now, this is the creative cash flow show for a reason. We like creative real estate, right? A lot of the real estate that I buy or have purchased, and a lot of our audience does on terms. We'll do a contract for deed. We'll purchase on a contract for deed. We'll sell on a contract for deed. We'll buy in a lease to own, sell in a lease to own. We might buy in a 2 to 4 person LLC partnership, right? So with all those little nuances, how does that come into play with how you bought something now and then how you're going to purchase the next property? And if I'm in an LLC with 3 other buddies over here, do we have to do that same LLC with those 3 guys on the next place? And if I'm alone in this one, do I have to be alone in the next one? Let's get into some of those FAQs that I'm sure you get a lot.
We have these very same nuances in the world of 1031, but we're looking at them not maybe from the same vantage point that you are. You are a deal maker. You're an entrepreneur first. Our perspective is the tax tail is going to wag the dog. The tax considerations are more important than anything else because the battle we want to win is the deferral of the gain, whereas you are a deal maker. So let's talk about these nuances and how we approach them differently.
Great point. Mm-hmm.
I want to buy as much real estate as I can. If I can buy on a contract for deed, great. For example, my client that's buying in Florida needs to buy a $600,000 property and they've got $150,000 of cash. I could go to that seller and say, let me give you my $150,000 cash downstroke and we'll finance the rest on a contract for deed with the seller. That would work great and would lessen my client's need to add cash to that purchase. Keeping your cash in your own pocket is always preferable. So the debt relief can be offset with seller-back debt on the replacement side.
It can.
Okay, you tracking me?
I'm tracking.
Right?
Yeah.
So I don't have to borrow it from a bank. I can borrow it from the seller. So
bank, seller, same thing, doesn't matter.
Or cash in out of your own pocket.
Or cash in your pocket. Got it.
Now, when you, Jesse, let's say that you want to do a 1031 exchange on a duplex you bought 20 years ago. Okay? I'm going to tell you, Jesse, you're going to sell that thing for $600,000. You're going to pay off your $450,000 mortgage, and you're going to get $150,000 of cash to put into the new deal. And if a buyer comes to you and says, Jesse, I'll buy that duplex from you, but I need you to loan me $100,000. I need you to seller back finance me some cash. I would say to you, Jesse, we need your 150 net proceeds to go into the new replacement property in order to buy something of equal or greater equity. And furthermore, you probably need it from a practical perspective because you're not going to get a 600,000 plus replacement property unless you've got some cash to redeploy. So I generally tell people to try to avoid seller-backed financing on the sale of your old relinquished properties because it can jam up your ability to go up or equal in value, and definitely can jam you up on going up or equal in equity.
Gotcha.
But if you told me, hey, don't worry about it, Jeff, I just recently won the Powerball lottery and I've got all this cash sitting around, and I'd rather loan some of this money to my buyer and get a higher rate of return than the bank will give it to me. So if you want to bring money to the relinquished closing and fund your seller-backed financing, we can fix the problem. The old expression is cash is king.
Yeah.
So true when you're trying to fix a seller-backed financing issue. Okay.
Now, what if that person's getting a new mortgage and they have the downstroke for the down payment on the new mortgage? It's a greater, equal or greater value and equity, and they can still qualify with financing, but they're getting rid of their relinquished property is with seller financing. Still doable?
Well, I want you to notice that if you're doing seller-backed financing for your buyer and you're financing it out of the proceeds, you're not going to be able to redeploy all of your equity because some of your equity is actually getting loaned to the purchaser rather than getting redeployed into the replacement property. So that's why cash is king, because if you can add cash, then we can offset, if you will, the amount that's being loaned to the buyer out of your own pocket.
So it may depend on the downstroke or what I want to put into it or how much the gains I want to do, right? Because this isn't an all or nothing type of game, is it?
It's not an all or nothing, but I'm a zealous advocate for deferring 100% of the gains. But if you want to do a partial tax deferral, that's cool. Again, if you've got a little cash, if you got some liquidity, we can work around some of those difficulties on seller-backed financing when you're the seller. When you're doing the exchange and you're the seller, that gets more complicated. The best way to avoid it, Jesse, is just try to get cash on the barrelhead. Let's sell it to an easy buyer rather than a hard buyer, right?
Okay.
When we're the buyer, we'll be hard. We'll be driving the difficult deals, but when we're the seller, let's find the easy buyers.
Okay. Now, another question. How quickly can I purchase something and then sell it before this doesn't make sense?
All right. So if you read the Internal Revenue Code, you'll see that 1031 exchanges are for properties that are held for investment or business purposes. But it's not for all real estate. It's only investment or business or property that's used in your trade. So what's outside of that strike zone? The IRS would say that inventory, property that you hold primarily for resale, is not held for investment. It's held for resale. So your flippers, your condo converters, your land developers and peddlers of individual lots, those people that are dealers that are selling this real estate like they're stock in trade may not be eligible for 1031. Just this week, I got a call from a very experienced real estate agent. He said, I'm selling a duplex I've owned for 15 years, and I'm selling a flip property, and I want to take the proceeds from both of those and buy a Airbnb VBRO rental in Arizona. I said, well, the duplex that you've owned for 15 years sounds like it fits nicely, but I don't think you want to do dealer flip property for a number of different reasons. And after he consulted with his accountant, I kind of waved the red flag, but then he went to his accountant to discuss it. He came back and said, no, I'm just going to do the duplex I've owned for 15 years. I'll worry about the tax hit on that flip in a different fashion.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I knew you were going to say that, or I had a pretty sneaking suspicion, right? It just doesn't make sense for rehab flips, and it's a different ballgame. It's active trade, like dealer. It's not an investment purchase, right?
Well, I think everybody should have that team built with a good accountant or tax preparer. There are other ways to structure your flipping activities, different business ways to own your flipping operation, to take advantage of deductions and mitigate tax hits. That's a different topic probably for you to have a podcast about it. How can flippers manage their tax burdens in an efficient fashion? You should probably find a great accountant that can talk to that.
Absolutely.
A lot of people ask me for accountant referrals, and it's hard to give people, especially the small mom and poppers, a good referral because many of the accountants I deal with are either, getting way up there in years and they're not trying to take on more clients, or they're operating at such a high level that they can't do the mom and pop transactions. They're working with corporations and businesses that have hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue each year. So it's hard to find people to work with when you're in that sort of small to medium growth stage.
Sure. Yeah. No, I understand that. Definitely. But yeah, that's the thing. And it's a whole other ballgame, right? That's not, I just had that podcast episode about that in the last couple of weeks where, flipping is not really investing. And a lot of folks, will come to me and our group and our team, and we want to get into investing, and I'm looking to make, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 a month every month. Well, that's not investing. Tell me where you just go get that for cash flow and investing. That's great, but that's earned income. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's two different things. Which we want to make sure we have the right vernacular, right? Because that is earned income, and that's, short-term capital gains and, some of the highest tax rates. So really, landlords are your bread and butter, right?
They are landlords, long-term property owners, people that are holding property for appreciation or using the property in their business. Like a lot of business owners own the land and building, and they lease the land and building to their operating business. Let's say that you're a dry cleaner. You probably own the dry cleaning business in a corporation, and you own your land and building in an LLC comprised of the spouses that are the folks that own the land and building through their LLC. And then the LLC leases the property to their corporation. In that situation, you're using it for business. You're using it for your own trade or business, right? But you could also lease it to other individuals that are going to have it. So land that's used for appreciation, land that's used for business. And then we see a lot of Airbnb, VBRO rentals right now. You got to make sure that you're predominantly using it for rental business and only ever so gently using for personal use, maybe less than 14 days a year or less than 10% of the time it's actually rented, in order to fit into the IRS's safe harbor for what is an investment or business property. So the other side of this spectrum of outside of the safe harbor, outside of the strike zone for 1031, is the personal use property, the second home. Jesse, if you sell your second home, can you do a 1031 exchange on it? Probably not, if it's not an investment or business property. Just because it went up in value doesn't make it qualified for 1031. And so we see a lot of people that are struggling with, what do we do with this property that we've never used for investment or business, but it's also not our principal residence. We can't take the principal residence exclusion on. One strategy that you might like that goes to your nuance about leasing is lease it to the potential buyer for 24 months. Right. And at the end of that 24-month lease, have a springing option. If the tenant complies with all of the terms and conditions of the lease, then they have the exclusive right to buy the property at a predetermined price. And
lease
that
option,
way,
lease purchase.
You've converted a property that you were using as your second home, as a personal use. You've converted it to a rental property, and then you've given the renter the option to buy the property. That is a great way to fix the personal use dilemma.
So I love that, and let's expound on that. That's good. So first of all, and I know there's multiple things to look at, but second home, right? What do we say? So anything more than 14 days you stay there is possibly a second home, or I mean, there's some vagueness to that, right? And depends on what sort of rules and codes we're looking at. But certain people are saying, I'm rarely there that often, right? It's truly a business. right? It's an Airbnb, it's a VRBO, it's a business. Others are saying, nah, I'm here or there every once in a while. And then the second part I want to hit on, it's a two-part question. You said 24 months. Why 24 months?
Well, first of all, let's talk about some people. You may own your primary home in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but you may have a second home, a lake cabin. Is this common in Minnesota? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
The land of 10,000 lakes. You may have a lake cabin 2 to 3 hours away from your primary residence, perhaps in Baldwin, Wisconsin. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you don't use the Baldwin, Wisconsin property for investment or business. You use it for personal recreation. You're playing cards, you're entertaining friends and family, you're sitting in your hot tub, you're fishing, you're snowmobiling, whatever. That property in Baldwin, Wisconsin is not an investment or business property.
No.
It's your second home.
Yep.
But it goes up in value because lakeshore property is scarce, and you now are going to be able to sell it for a $500,000 gain. Well, just because you have a profit on the property doesn't mean it's eligible for 1031. And so my strategy is, let's rent out that property for a substantial period of time to bring it back into the fold of being an investment or business property so that it can then qualify for 1031. We have to take that smell of personal use off of the property to get it to qualify. And there are many people, particularly in Minnesota, that have owned appreciated property either on the Arrowhead part of the state, up a Grand Marais area, or in the lake, the Whitefish chain, that have huge appreciation on their second homes and don't know what to do with the tax hit. Now, getting back to your question, Jesse, if you own a ski chalet in Vail, Colorado, and you like to go out there and ski, you may want to limit your personal use of that Vail, Colorado condo to less than 14 days a year or less than 10% of the time it's actually rented, so that you don't give the IRS the idea that this thing is used more for personal use than their limits that they have in their safe harbors. In their safe harbor, they test each of the two 12-month periods, either before you sell it or after you acquire it. Each of those two 12-month periods are separately tested to ascertain, have you minimally rented it out at least 14 days in that time period, and have you constrained or limited your personal use to less than 14 days a year or less than 10% of the time it's rented. What we're trying to do is stay inside of their safe harbor so they don't challenge whether this is an investment or business property. But if you use that property for 180 days a year, I think it's likely they're going to say that's not an investment or business property.
That's a cabin. That's a second home. Absolutely.
That's right.
So the 2 years is important. Now, what if that person wants to exercise their option to buy in 12 months? Do you say,
Well,
sorry?
my lease says it's a 24-month lease.
But what about your option agreement?
And the option isn't springing until you've satisfied all of the terms and conditions of that 24-month lease.
Ah, got it.
Now, if you want to be a riverboat gambler and sell it shorter than 24 months, you can make that decision after consulting your accountant, your priest and rabbi and yogi and all of your spiritual advisors about what is going to be, what's going to sit well with you. But for me, because the IRS tests two 12-month periods in their own safe harbor, I think 24 months is probably the benchmark I personally would feel like satisfying before disposing of it.
I love it. You just hit on so many people that are in a situation like that, clearly, here in Minnesota, but around the country, who have second homes going up in value. They're, on the lakes, rivers, the water, mountains, and eventually they want to get rid of it. And what a great way to get rid of it. Again, just knowing the strategies. And so if you don't know, you don't have the right people on your team, as you've pointed out, Jeff, it's so important to have a strong team, have the right team who can advise you in all these different areas, because there's no way one person can cover all this, right? But the cool thing is you don't need to. You just need to have the people in your network and in your circle who can say, this is the guy I talk to, this is the gal I talk to, this is the woman for this is the guy for this, right? And really build your team up, which is awesome. So on the creative side, so it would make a lot more sense if someone's buying and selling, doing creative stuff on a lease to own, lease with an option. What if I were to buy something that I have a pretty good idea I could sell in a year and a half? You still think 2 years is kind of that? Is that the magic thing? If I maybe buy something, I'm fairly certain these folks don't need a lot of time, but I want to 1031 it into a new deal. Is 2 years kind of the number we're looking at?
I think that this requirement that the property be held for a qualified use is a facts and circumstances analysis. And there are so many facts and circumstances that could go into this that it's almost too much for this short little podcast. But
yeah,
Jesse, if you told me, hey, my main gig is I'm a flipper. I flip 300 properties every year. And then you're talking to me about having a short hold on a property. That may skew the facts and circumstances because this guy is a flipper.
Yeah.
You know, that's all he does every day, all day long is he's flipping.
Yeah.
And now you want to do a short hold on a property. That might weight this decision into the category of let's hold for a substantial period of time and really make sure we've got this maybe segregated into a different business entity away from the flipping activities, and we hold it for a substantial period of time. Because while there is no minimum bright line holding period that anyone can point to in the regulations or in the code, I think holding it for a substantial period of time is an important fact.
And the fact is an investment
analysis.
the entire time, right? It's a rental property day one. That's what it is. It's not a second home. It's not a cabin.
Well, it could be just land that you buy for appreciation.
Sure.
Right? You may buy land that's in the path of development and hold it for a period of time because you know it's going to go up in value. It'll become more desirous. If you know where the city planning is going, where they're going to try to orient new construction or new development, you can try to buy land in the path of that coming development. And that doesn't need to be rented so much as it needs to be held for the right mindset, which is holding it for appreciation or investment.
Okay, gotcha. So I want to touch on a couple quick things, and then I unfortunately have to wrap up because we could have a part 2 and 3 for sure on this, Jeff. So much to get into.
I do think you had mentioned that you wanted to do a podcast on the creative sort of out there things. And for our next segment, I think we're going to talk about reverse exchanges. We're going to talk about construction exchanges. And we're going to talk about related party issues, which is a whole nother topic. So in our next podcast, I think we're going to be able to go down a couple of different rabbit holes and really give people some real gold, as you said. Let them come away with some stuff that they can utilize in their lives to maximize and, magnify the benefits of a 1031 exchange.
Absolutely. Well, and there's a lot of different areas this can go to for sure. So on like kind, just give your explanation of kind of like kind. What does that mean? If I'm selling something in Minnesota, I want to buy something in Florida, in Arizona. If I'm selling a duplex, but I want to get a true vacation rental that's not a second home, but it's a rental, how does all that come into play?
Well, this is confusing to some people because we used to be able to do exchanges of personal property, chattel, non-real estate. So what is personal property, chattel, real estate? We used to be able to do exchanges of aircraft, business equipment, printing presses, boats and vessels and railroad cars. But in 2018, Congress changed 1031 and limited the scope to just real estate. And we can do exchanges of real estate throughout the United States. But what is real estate? Jesse, if you owned a leasehold estate, and on that leasehold estate, which is next to a freeway, you had a billboard, and you rented the billboard advertising, is that considered real estate? Well, it may be determined whether or not you own the fee title underneath that billboard, or if you own a 30-year ground lease, or if you own an easement. So what is real estate? That's a good question. The regulations were updated in 2020 to try to help give greater clarity as to what is real estate, but there's still a lot of questions, and it may require a deep dive. Is improved property like the World Trade Center or the Fauché Tower, is that like kind to a farm in Decorah, Iowa? Is
Right.
improved property like kind to unimproved property? There are a lot of questions about that. I think the biggest one I come up with is people that are buying mobile homes as investments. Is an RV more akin to a car than it is real estate? Is it licensed by the Department of Motor Vehicles in the state, or is it treated as a real property asset?
Yeah.
Because there are all these rental communities in Florida that are basically pad sites. And on those pad sites may be affixed some kind of mobile dwelling unit that's not considered real estate because it's not permanently affixed and it
Yeah.
has a VIN number, rather than a postal address.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful what is considered real estate. And there has been a lot of litigation between the IRS and taxpayers, some very big cases. And those are good questions to dig into.
Yeah, I bet. Well, if you haven't picked up by now, folks, ask the questions, do the analysis and the digging and the exploration before you sell, before you buy, right? And if you've just sold something, unfortunately, that piece of real estate, it's too late. But it's just that one, right? And no one that's watching or listening, at least in my book, is here to get one place and be done. This is a system. This is a business. We're trying to create freedom and lifestyle, and that takes lots of real estate, lots of different properties and units and ways of doing it. So it's super important that you have someone like Jeff on your team helping with that, and the fact you can help all over the country, heck, the world. You got me excited. I'm going to geek out a little bit on international stuff. Is awesome. So Jeff, where can our listeners and watchers find you? Where can we find more information on you? How do we connect?
Well, if you Google Jeff Peterson 1031, you'll probably find me at CPEC 1031. That's Charlie Papa Echo Charlie 1031.com. And my phone number is 612-643-1031. 612-643-1031. Jesse, thanks for letting me put my information out on the internet with you.
I mean, it ends in 1031. Come on, Jeff. How'd you get that?
Gotta love it. Yes.
Man, I
Good
love
living.
that. Love that. I'm pretty sure you didn't just go to like Verizon or Sprint to go, I'm going to become an intermediary. I've got 1031 in the last four of my digits. You're all in, man. I dig it. I dig it. Well, there's some stuff that I definitely would love to chat with you about as well in regards to some certain stuff that we have going on business-wise, Jeff. So I'll be reaching out to you about that specifically. And I'm looking forward to having you back on to really dive deeper into everything here. I'm so excited. I'm thinking about 8 things right now. I'm excited, man. So we'll get you back on and we will talk about some more stuff in the weeds and some really cool, unique things that I know will blow some people's minds. So awesome.
Very good. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff. Have an awesome day. We'll talk with you soon.